So, good evening, everyone. My name is George Minikakis. I want to welcome all of you to this meeting this evening. I just wanted to let you know that there's probably in the neighborhood of about 120 RSVPs this evening. That may mean a couple of hundred people or more. If I start by stating the number of hours that everyone's worked, yourselves and the team that's involved in putting the letters together, it would be an underinflated number of hours and very understated on how hard everybody's worked to get to this point and prepare for this letter that needs to be sent out. In addition, hopefully I'll make you laugh for a moment. The action board, I've been making, sportsman-like bets. We were betting that JDCL will probably send us a letter sometime between Christmas and New Year's. And here we are. So they're rather very predictable because they know you're busy, preoccupied, and concerned. They think that you might be less likely to act on this letter. Of course, they're not right. And the letter itself, for those of you that have read it, was written rather in a very circular manner, designed to confuse and diminish the concerns that you have, and also suggesting that you don't care. Of course, we know that's not true. And if it was, the Premier wouldn't have said, stop this. In addition, it wasn't until the end of the letter, well, I found that very interesting. It wasn't until the end of the letter before we saw a date on it, which is odd. Every business letter I've ever written, the date was always on the top. And it's been an issue, a litany of issues and things that have come up over the last few weeks. And in fact, we've heard that some folks someone's been conducting surveys, calling homes, asking whether or not the quarry was important to you or CN Intermodal was more important to you as an issue. So who would do such a thing? Well, I think that anyone who's afraid of your voices and your letters would do such a thing. A quarry in our community remains the wrong thing to approve. It's not because we're against quarries. But if you think about this, the quarry is conducting blasting so close to homes, the trucks, the noise, the pollution, all the impacts simply disruptive to residents, local businesses, and the natural environment on so many levels and so many issues that it'd be very difficult just to list everything on one page or 10 pages. And there are outcomes and consequences that have yet to be discussed and figured out. Yet JDCL wants you to file in a letter that has solutions. Well, that's not realistic. It's unfortunate that we have to go through this process, and I'll provide a message on that towards the end. Before I turn it over to Mike, though, I'd like to point out a couple more things. Debbie Stokes, she has been out there canvassing residents to sign our online petition. If you haven't done so, it'd really be great if you did that soon, because that online petition just reassures everyone that has opposed, particularly our government officials, that it's still an issue. And right to this point, there are 489 people who have signed up. We'd love to get that well over 500 so we can send it in. And look, we don't sell, you have to put your email address on it. We don't sell email lists to anyone. It's secure with us. And primarily, there's a financial reason for doing this too, by the way. It's if we don't have to mail letters, put stamps on them, we're saving the community hundreds of thousands of dollars instead of that. But I'll be back towards the end, and I'll give you my summation, but I really want you to hear what the team has to say about what the issues are and how all of this has transpired and where we're heading. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Mike Balkwell with the Milton Water Watchers, and I'm their facilitator for tonight. In terms of the agenda, it's a pretty focused meeting. It's internal. We don't have any external guests. We haven't invited politicians to this meeting. This meeting is all about the moment that George described in terms of responding to these letters to JDCL. So the way we structured the meeting is in a moment, Cease Moffat is going to give kind of a background, where we are, how we got here. And then we're going to get into the instrumental details of how to respond to the JDCL letter. And depending on what kind of a letter you got, what kind of a letter you respond with. So we'll be providing very detailed information on that. And if you have questions, then we're going to ask you to pose those questions in the chat box. Just because of the volume of people we have here, it's difficult to go on and off and have you speak your question. So we'll ask you to put those in the chat box. We're going to have an opportunity to also ask questions about what's going on, the moment that we're at, and then as George has said, he'll come back at the end for a closing message. We're thinking at the max, this is about an hour's meeting, and we're going to be as responsive as we can with the online technology that we have. Like I say, I always like to ask these meetings by saying, are we at the same meeting? I hope so. And I encourage you, by the way, to introduce yourself via the chat box so we can all see who's here, say hello to each other. And while you do that, I'm going to introduce Cease Moffat and ask her to come on, turn her microphone on and tell us where we are and how we got here.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So good evening, everybody. I am here to tell you exactly as Mike said, why we're here tonight, how we got here, and where we are in the process. And I think to do that, I need to take all of you back, and for some this you may have really understand the process, but I need to take you back to where this started and why it's so important before December 15th for everybody in the community to send some sort of response into the MNRF and to JDCL. So if we go back in time and we go back to August 2nd of 2018, JDCL did two things under the Aggregate Resources Act and the provincial standards that apply. They filed a notice in the Champion that they were applying for a license, and they put a sign out on the road. Not a very visible sign, but they still complied with the standards, and they put a sign out. And that started a 2-year window within which essentially objectors could start making comments, objecting to the license, etc. In that 2-year window, there was an initial 45 days. And that 45 days ran from August 2nd to September 17th. And so many of you might have remembered that there was a flurry of activity in the community to try and scramble to understand what this application meant, what the implications to the community were, and to get a response in within that 45 days. And it was very important to get the response in to ensure that every community member who wanted to would have what we call objector status if this thing goes to an LPAT. And an LPAT is the Land Planning Appeal Tribunal, which is where this may go to, and we're trying to avoid. So at the end of, in September of 2018, everybody put in letters, and we had probably over 1,000 letters that were submitted to both JDCL and the MNRF. Then, if you recall, everything was quiet for a while, and in April of 2019, a notice of objector response, similar to what some of you have received, but not everybody, was sent out to some, but not all of the 1,000 members in the community that had initially sent in an objection in the fall of 2018. So again, as a community, and many of you might have been at the May 8th meeting that we held at the Mohawk, we scrambled and we pulled together a response because again, we only had a 20-day period, and residents put in a formal notice of objection, and that was to ensure that they, again, retain their objector status and that they don't get knocked off what is considered a list at the MNRF. The problem was that in 2019, in the spring of 2019, in May, when everybody reacted, there were still some people that actually never did get a notice of objector response. So notwithstanding they put an objection in back into the fall of 2018, they didn't hear from JDCL. So moving forward, we now have another letter from JDCL, which is another 20-day notice to those that have objected that they need to put in a response. The very interesting thing is that not all 1,000 residents or objectors have received one of these notices, nor actually have the people that put in a further notice of objection in the spring of 2019. And there's a pattern here where JDCL seems to be, I don't know if it's sloppy or if it's intentional or what it might be, but there's slow attrition of who is receiving these notice of objector letters. And it's important for us to do two things. And that is that to make sure as a community, if anybody has received a formal notice of objector response, that they in turn send back a formal response. And there's a bit of misleading information in JDCL's letter where it does say, if you filed a letter in the spring of 2019, you don't need to do anything. Well, that's not correct. So anybody that is relying on that, I would encourage you, please don't. The Aggregate Resource Act standards are pretty clear that every time you receive a formal notice from the applicant, you need to respond in the 20-day window. So we've sent out a rather complicated instructions sheet and 3 samples of letters that we would like the community to use. And the first one, which I'm going to call letter A, and it's referred to as letter A in our instruction sheet, is to be used by everybody that in this just received a letter from JDCL via registered mail. I believe it's dated November 19, and telling you that you have to respond by December 15. If you receive one of those letters, or you received a notification from the post office that there's probably one to pick up and you haven't picked it up, you do need to respond. And you can craft your own letter, but we've tried to make it easy for you, and we've provided a form that you can use. And we've provided you with some opportunity to add your own additional comments, which we'd really encourage you to do. So please don't go by what JDCL has said to you in their November 19 letter. We do want you, and you should, to ensure that you maintain your objector status, respond using our version of letter A or your own version of a letter. For those that didn't receive a letter this time, but they did receive one in May or April of 2019, then what you need to do is use our version of letter B, which basically says, I filed an objection, I responded once, I haven't heard back, I'm maintaining my objections, and I'm not giving up on my objections, and I want JDCL to follow the process. And so we would encourage you to do that. And again, just to ensure that you maintain objector status on the MNRLF list and on this file. And likewise, if you are one of the many residents, in actual fact, who sent an objection letter in the fall of 2018 and you've heard nothing, we also would like you to send in letter B, which again simply says, I filed an objection, I've heard nothing back from the applicant in almost 2 years, and I'm maintaining my objection and I need a response. It's very important that JDCL be held to the process if this is the process it wants to follow. We have a letter C, which I'm not sure if we have on the website. It is in the instructions, but that is if you're somebody that simply hasn't objected yet or hasn't sent in a letter because it's taken, you're either not on a mailing list, but this is of concern to you. Maybe you've just moved to the community. Maybe you just weren't aware of what was going on. You now are, and you're very concerned. We have a version of what we call letter C, which you can use. Again, you can write whatever letter you want, but we want to make this easy for you. Now, there's some technicalities of getting these letters to the MNRF. And those that got a formal notice of objection, the letters say, or sorry, notice of objector response, the letters say they have to be sent either by personal delivery or registered mail and received by December 15th. I've had a lot of back and forth with the Ministry of Natural Resources the past couple of days. And in actual fact, it looks like registered mail is not an option, because if anybody was going to respond by registered mail, they needed to put their letter in the mail by today, because it's deemed to have been sent 5 days after it's mailed, which means that if you wanted it to be there for December 15th, it would have had to have gone in the mail today. So the only option to actually get your letter to the MNRF, the ministry, and to JDCL, we'll get to that, is to actually do personal delivery. Personal delivery can be courier, but Action is going to help everybody by actually collecting all of the letters and doing one delivery for the entire community who would like our assistance. I have confirmed with the MNRF that a courier delivery is acceptable, and we will do that. We will also, because the standards require it, we'll take a package to the MNRF, and we'll also take a package to James Dick. We have to file a copy of every letter with both the applicant and the ministry. The kicker here is that back in May, when we did this, we all know that JDCL is in Bolton. That's close enough. The ministry office is no longer Aurora, it's Peterborough. And so again, you'll see the address that we have used on our, all of our letters. That's a Peterborough address, but we would be taking the letters to Peterborough. I'm going to backtrack a little bit, and I think there's a lot of questions coming in, but I want to backtrack a little bit about the timing as well, which I should have said. The 2-year process originally, if you did your math, obviously, started August 2nd of 2018, and it should have ended August 2nd of 2020. And because of COVID, as many of you may be aware, the government passed an emergency order where basically all proceedings in Ontario, court proceedings, tribunal proceedings, proceedings under any statute or piece of legislation, were stayed. And so that became effective March 15th. That order was lifted September 14th. So there was sort of a 6-month stay or a hiatus where the 2-year period stopped running. The period's now running, and I've been trying to get confirmation from the MNRF what the actual end date of the 2-year period is. Have not got that yet, but my math does tell me it's probably somewhere around mid-January, maybe January 17th, 18th. We will drill down on that. But that is why, so just so that the reason these notices of objection are still coming out is because that 2-year period was extended due to COVID. The other thing I want to say is that obviously, as George said, we weren't surprised to see this last notice of objector response coming out. We did place bets on when we would see it, and we knew it would end up being something that would be disruptive to our personal lives, which it very much was at this time of year for everybody. But I think, we're trying to, there's 2 reasons I think that JDCL has done this. Number one, they are trying to push this process forward in reaction to the Premier's announcement on July 29th. They didn't like that. We know they didn't like it. We saw a letter that they sent to the OSSGA sent to the Premier and the MNRF. So they didn't like it, and they're doing everything to push this through the process. Now, granted as well, they're coming up against the end of their 2-year period, and they have to ensure that they've complied with the provincial standards and they've followed the process. And we have pointed out in various correspondence with levels of government that the process has been somewhat sloppy. So I think this is an attempt to swoop everything and try and clean it up, which means all the more importance for everybody to take that little bit of time and send, if they can send letter A, send letter A. And even if they didn't get a notice from JDCL this time, if they want to send a letter A or any equivalent of that, they still could do that. There's nothing to say you can't. If you don't want to do that, at a minimum, send letter B to maintain the objector status. And as I said, if you're new to the community, even if you're in a budding community, you're from Oakville, you're from Burlington, it doesn't really matter where you're from. If you now realize that this could have an impact on rural Halton and everybody's enjoyment of it, then please send letter C. Because one of our objectives with all of this is to make noise. We want to hold the Premier and the province to their promise. And so the more noise we make, we obviously, the better chance we have of ensuring that the Premier follows through on that province. We do not want JDCL to try and turn to the Premier and to the Minister and say, look, not very many people responded to our December 15th notice of objector response. They're not really concerned as a community. We can't allow that to happen. We have to have everybody, and we're trying to make it easy for you. We have suggested, even if you want to, if you can't get to the drop-off points, let us know. PDF the letters, we can print them. I'll also say one other thing. If you have 5 members in your household and only one of them has received the notice of objector response, but maybe all of you put the original objection in, send 5 letters. Don't send 1. If you need us to print copies for you because you don't have a printer, reach out. We'll get to you. We'll give you extra copies. But again, the more, we would love to drive the numbers up so that we're back to where we were in the fall of 2018. So I hope I've been clear. I'm happy to answer any questions. The rest of the board can tell me if I missed anything. I don't think I have, but anyway.
Thank you, Cease. That was a very clear and very comprehensive and very well-paced presentation. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Here's the first question. It came early in your presentation. What if I can't find the letter that was sent to me?
This time round, or I mean, this particular registered letter can't be found?
I think so. I think that's what this
Then
refers to.
just take letter A. If you know you got one, take letter A, add to it your personal thoughts, right on the back of it too. You know, if it doesn't have to be, I'm not sure, I think we sent you a 2-sided one, attach a Schedule A, but use what we've sent to you. It doesn't matter that you lost it. I'll also say, for some of you that might think you've got one at the post office and you're so ticked off, or you haven't had a chance to get there, what a crazy time of year, asking everybody to go in during COVID, fill out letter A.
Okay, Cease. First of all, Debbie Duclos says, excellent job explaining all the letter C's. A quick clarification, there are 2 parts to this. Each addressee should write a response that received a letter, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and letter A has both the JDCL and Ministry of Natural Resources addressed at the top. Is that one letter going to both of them, or does the addressee have to send letter A to both?
It has to go to both. So what we do for you, or you can do it yourself, is when all of these letters are collected, and this is exactly what we did in May of 2019, we will run, if you haven't provided us with duplicates, we will actually run a copy and make sure we have 2 copies of each letter. We will also, just so everybody knows, keep a copy so that Action has a copy on file of everybody's letter. We will then deliver 1 set of the letters to JDCL, and we'll deliver the 2nd set to the MNRF. So just going back, Debbie, maybe I didn't quite understand. Each addressee should write a response that received a letter. So you're saying, I think you're asking me if you received a registered letter, whichever addressees receive them. So for instance, if my husband and I receive one, we should both write a letter. If that's your question, then yes, absolutely.
Debbie, if we didn't answer that question, please add in the chat box. I'll just read out here in case you're not seeing it, folks. Scott says everyone on this call should make sure to talk to their neighbors and friends to make sure they know the importance of responding. So I'm just clarifying again here, Cease. If somebody's neighbor and friend didn't receive a letter, they can still send one. Is that correct? And if so, which letter?
That's correct. And Scott, thank you for asking that question, because that was one of the points in my mind I did want to say. Everybody, you know, again, I'm going to say that the board, the volunteers, the people behind the scenes with Action have done so much work to really try and protect our community. And I would ask everybody just to take a few minutes, call your neighbor. COVID, you can't necessarily knock on the door, but talk to your neighbors, even if they didn't get a letter, even if they haven't done anything in the past. Let's say they have not done anything in the past. They didn't file an objection back in 2018. Ask them to send at least letter C. If they did file something originally in the fall of 2018, they could still send in letter A, to be frank. So make them send something. And if they're not comfortable sending in the letter A, they can send the B, which says, I sent an objection in the fall, but I didn't get an answer, and I want an answer, and I want to hold JCL to the process, which is basically what it's saying, and I still object.
Now, Cease, people can go to the Action Milton website in order to get links to all these letters to share with their friends. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is there something coming in the mail to everybody?
So yeah, as I'm speaking, some of you may have received a letter from Action that said, I think on the outside, Sharon can correct me, it says urgent, please open immediately, or must be opened. It's got the Action logo on it on the left corner. And in there is actually the forms of letters A and B and the instructions sheet. We didn't include letter C because we did a mailing to everybody that we have on our mailing list. And obviously letter C is to try and reach out to a broader community. Those people that aren't on our mailing list. And as George said, we would love to have you on the mailing list. Not that we want to sell your mailing list, use your mailing list. We would never do that. I'm a lawyer. We're not going to do that. I won't let the board do that. But if we can reach out to you easily by email, then we can keep you really well informed. We can send these letters, these attachments, but we felt it was so important with this sort of last go around of the letter from JDCL that it warranted doing a mailing. So some of you will have received a letter in the mail from us. You may also receive a flyer because we are trying to hit the entire community who is not on our database to say, please go to our website. We have the forms of letters. We have A, B, and C. Please read the instructions. So again, back to Mike's comment, if you can take a few minutes to educate your neighbors, and you know, we really, you know, people tend to sort of think somebody else is going to take care of this problem for me. We need volume. We need to speak loudly. We need to let the Premier know, because we're going to be telling the Premier how many people have responded. So the bigger the number, the better. Think of it as a petition. It's the same thing, but more formality, and it carries more weight. So again, if you could speak to as many people as possible, that would be great.
Cease, we've been asked to tell people again where the drop-off places are.
Sure. So the drop-off is the Campbellville Village Market. I refer to it as Cristello's, but it's just, now I got to have Crawford Crescent. It's just off Crawford Crescent. If one of the other board members wants to confirm that I've got the right crescent that it's on, but if believe it's Crawford Crescent. So if you're coming down Guelph Line, for anybody that doesn't know, if you're just coming south on Guelph Line from the highway, and you make a turn onto Crawford Crescent, correct me if I'm wrong, board, but I believe it is, and the village market is just in there, little plaza, and right beside Campbellville Country Market as well is the Campbellville Pharmacy. And also Debbie Stokes' home on Reed Side Road. So again, coming north or south on Guelph Line, you're going to turn west onto Reed Side Road, and Debbie is just down Reed Side Road on the south side, and her home in the instructions is 2550 Reed Side Road. So there are 3 drop boxes at those locations. And at this point, we are leaving those drop boxes, Debbie aside, because she'll have people bothering her till whenever, but the drop boxes at the Campbellville Market and the pharmacy will be there until essentially sort of their time of closing. We do need time for people that are dropping the letters off. We'll need Sunday to organize them, copy them. We will be also preparing, we'll be counting them. We will do what we did last time in May of 2019. We prepared a formal receipt so that when we went up to JDCL, we actually made JDCL sign a receipt that at that time we were bringing 415 letters, formal letters of objection, and went to the MNRF, who at that time was in Aurora, and they actually sat and counted all the letters and stamped them, but they also signed a receipt. So Sunday, we will need the time to organize, but I would not want to dissuade anybody. If for some reason you just can't get the letter by Saturday, please make sure you get it to us. But everybody try and deal with the deadline, but please get it to us.
So what's the absolute latest deadline then on Sunday?
Where's Sharon Barkley? She's the one that's going to be probably Sharon.
There I am. I'm trying. I think thank you again. We're saying end of day Saturday. I mean, we'll do a quick sweep, obviously at end of day Sunday. And if people are later than that, if they tell you they can't possibly get it, we're still going to send it in. It won't be in the objector list, but it'll be in the counted list. And that's equally as important. Obviously, if you can get it in by the end of the day Saturday, that's the best.
Thanks, Sharon. We may have had this question already, and we may get a couple more times, Cease, but I know you're a patient person. So I don't remember if I filed something originally. Which letter do I send?
So that question probably means that you're not sure if you filed something in September of 2018, the fall of 2018. I would be, to be honest, if you're a local resident, it probably requires a bit of tweaking because you didn't get letter A. I would be inclined to say send letter C. If you're a little bit unsure, I suppose you could send letter A, and maybe you could hand change the lead-in language to say, I'm quite certain I filed an objection in 2018. Actually, sorry, I should back up on that. Maybe you send you send B that says, I'm quite certain I filed an objection in 2018, but I haven't received anything. So you could send B. You could arguably send C as well. I'm not being very clear on that one. I'm sorry, because I hadn't given consideration to that. But if you're unsure, arguably as I said, if you think you did, but you don't know, there's no harm in marking up letter B and saying, I believe I sent it, or.
Thanks,
So the point is the MNRF will look at their list, JDCL will look at their list, and they may say, no, you weren't on the original list.
Okay, somebody's saying if it's too late for me to send registered mail, I assume I could send the courier myself if I want to. I understand that Action will get it there for me. I just want to confirm my options.
You can, yes, you could send it yourself by courier. I'm going to forewarn you that, I mean, I'm not the expert on it probably, but I think the couriers are now not guaranteeing certain delivery. So for instance, if we have to have it there, if you have to have it there by Tuesday, and I think for some couriers there's a 3-day backlog, then you need to think about getting your response in, probably tomorrow and in a courier. So yes, you can send it by courier, but remember, if it's going by courier, it should get there by the 15th. And I don't think all the courier companies are guaranteeing same day delivery or delivery within a certain period of time. So you'll have to check with your courier company that you're using.
Debbie asks, does it matter if does the signature have to? Go ahead.
Does the which?
Okay,
What was your question?
Yeah, I'm going to say it again. Does it matter if it's not an original of the signature in the copying of the letter per your note? So if it's a photocopy of the letter, does it have to be an original signature on both copies?
No.
No. Okay. Somebody asks.
You mean if we're copying it for you? No.
Okay. Somebody asks, should we CC the letter to Parham Gill, Ford, Gary Carr, Conservation, Halston, Ministry of Environment, et cetera, et cetera? Should anybody be copied, the media, et cetera?
The people that it's being sent to are as required by the provincial standards under the Aggregate Resources Act. We're kind of following, the process. If after the fact you wish to send a copy of your letter to Parham, to the Premier, with a note to say that you continue to object, this is going to be very detrimental to the community, you could do that. I wouldn't necessarily put it on the letter itself, but there is nothing to prevent you sending it in via email after the fact to whichever governmental personnel you wish to send it to. So if I was in your shoes and that's what I wanted to do, I would send my letter in and I would send a personal letter to Parham and say, here's a copy of what I sent. I'm frustrated. Shouldn't have to be put through this process. The province has to come through on its promise. That is how I would handle it. I would leave the letter as it is so it complies with what the provincial standards require.
Michelle asks, I did not receive any mail or flyer yet. When did it go out?
We scrambled with the mail. We were, I say we, the board and several volunteers were stuffing envelopes on Monday night, and they went in the mail, about 860 or so. On Tuesday, those that I think would have gone through the Campbellville post office would have received them. It may well be that if it was going through a different post office, I believe some were dropped in Milton, some maybe Moffat and Rockwood. That might take an extra day, but I would hope that, again, you receive them. What's in the envelope is exactly what is on our website as well. And in actual fact, the website has letter C, the envelope does not. The instructions that are in the envelope are also on the website. So we really have done, we're trying to just reach everybody, which is why we chose to do both the mailing and put everything on the website and have this meeting. So you may receive it, but anyway, so you might not have got it yet, but I would be optimistic that it will be in your post box tomorrow or Thursday at the latest.
Please, can we also add that
Friday.
if you weren't on our mailing list, you probably won't get the letter.
Yeah, good point, George. Very good point. I mean, that's the whole point of hoping to increase our database. I think we have about 800 and something addresses in our database. And so for everybody that we had, we sent the letters to. If you're not in our database, you wouldn't have received it. And again, we would ask you to go to the website, and all of the letters and the instructions are available there.
Sonia Gill writes, I've just filled letter C and signed electronically via PDF and emailed it to Action Milton. It took 1 minute and it's easy to send to neighbors to join in. So thanks, Sonia, for doing that experiment for us, and we encourage everybody to do the same thing. Amanda says people can drop it at Cristello's instead of mailing themselves. Let's clarify that point. Abessa says, should the letters be placed in envelopes when dropping off at Cristello's?
No, the answer to that is no. Don't put them in an envelope, because we'll have to open that envelope in any event to make sure that the requisite copies are there, and then also to bundle all the letters together to deliver to JDCL and the MNRF. And just so you know, I have also confirmed with the MNRF, and we did this in May of 2019, but I confirmed again that it's fine that we send a bundle of letters together in one package.
Jim asks, do you want the letters to be 1 page, 2 sides, or to be 2 pages? Or do you care?
That's a Sharon Barkley question for photocopying.
Thank you. Actually, double-sided is better. If it's not double-sided, we'll make it double-sided. So thank you.
If we got the notice, this is the last question, unless anybody else has more. If we've got notice, pardon me, if we got notice on December the 3rd regarding the registered letter, should we comment on the letter that we only had 12 days to respond?
You're more than welcome to comment. I've already made some comments to Crystal D'Annunzio. I'm not going to pronounce her name correctly, D'Annunzio, and pointed out that many residents did not receive their registered letter until December 4th. And the way the Aggregate Resources Act provincial standards worked, they essentially had to have their response if they were sending registered mail today. So I have made that point, but there is no reason why you can't express your own frustration on how the process is actually not very objector friendly when it comes to the community and the residents and the wanting to respond to this in a court. So feel free, there's no harm in it.
Lang Moffat says in the chat box, if the letter does not arrive by Friday, just print it off the website. Canada Post has a 3 to 4 day backlog due to e-commerce Christmas volume. So you might not get your letter. There's another question here. What are the consequences if JDCL and MNRF look at their lists and say that I didn't send an objection in 2018?
It may well be that they determine that you don't have objector status, but part of the exercise here as well is really to let MNRF and JDCL know you're concerned. And when I say objector status, that means that if this ends up going to an LPAT hearing, that you as an individual don't get to make arguments at that LPAT hearing. That being said, we're not there, but if this goes to an LPAT hearing, I think Action as representative of a community, the community would work with everybody to decide who wants Action to be a voice for them at the LPAT hearing. So if you're somebody that arguably didn't get a letter in time, and technically you don't have objector status, that doesn't mean that your voice isn't going to be heard. But again, if you're concerned about, don't let the fact you don't know that if you put an original objection in dissuade you from saying something now, because part of this exercise again is to tell the MNRF and the Premier that that this quarry would be problematic for this community and for Milton, for rural Milton, for the GTA. To be frank, there are many people in the Halton region that come in and take advantage of rural Milton and the areas around Campbellville. So all the voices need to be heard. And again, it's a technical issue, objector status.
Thank you, Cease. I think we've exhausted the questions. We do have a moment here where if people had a comment you want to make about the kind of moment we find ourselves in, or if you have a question of a technical nature, the technical committee is on standby to answer those kinds of questions. So I'm going to just kind of pause for a couple moments here and watch the chat box.
George, sorry, Mike, there is a question from Scott Jackson there that I wanted to understand. And Scott has said, I sent an objector response in April 2019 only, and I am still on the list of objectors. So I don't believe 218. Okay, that's fine. I see what Scott is saying. And I'd like to ask Scott, did he actually get another notice of objector letter in December? And
while Scott answers, someone had, Scott says yes.
Okay. Well, excellent. That's great. So that's very good. And that is what we would hope to happen is that, and for argument's sake, as I mentioned before, let's say you only moved into the community within the 2-year window. You weren't here in 2018. There's nothing to prevent you. That's great, Scott. And obviously you're an example that if somebody's just moved here or they still feel they want to put in a formal objection, they want to use letter A, go for it. I mean, if you want to tweak the opening because the lead in is a little bit specific, but please, send an objection in. So I appreciate you saying that, Scott, because I think that's an important message for everybody. Arguably, it's not too late.
Does everyone have to be 18 years of age to sign a letter?
In actual fact, there's nothing in the ARA regs or the provincial standards that talks about age of an objector. So again, I would be inclined if you've got a teenager in your family or somebody's younger than a TJ that actually feels strongly about the issue and is equally concerned, there's no reason why they couldn't send a letter in.
Now, I missed a question. Ken, I'm asking if you're listening to repost the question. Ken asked a question earlier about David Crombie, so I'm going to wait for Ken to repost that question so we can ask it. Does anybody else have any other general questions? Debbie Duclos says, thank you all. Action Milton for what you're doing. Let's stay strong and be determined to keep the pressure on. Are there any other general questions or questions of a technical nature? I'm stalling here for a little bit of time, Ken, hoping you'll repost your question about David Crombie. Ken says, okay, so it's coming. Jim says, we feel privileged to be represented by such a capable and dedicated committee. This is where in Zoom land, you can all reach through around and just pat them on the back. Just kind of put your hand up like this, or down at the bottom, you can see reactions. You can clip on theirs, you can applaud for them. You can give them a thumbs up. You can send a love signal to them. You can cry if you're so frustrated about how this is going. You can whatever expresses how you feel. Thank you, Action, for all the work you're doing. Let's all support them by getting lots of letters in. Great meeting, very important. Answered the questions before I could ask. Way to go, Cease. Ken, I'm still watching for your question here. Trying to create a little space to get your David Crombie question in before we go to George for the closing comments. Okay, Ken.
Can you backtrack on the question?
Well, here it is. What do you think about David Crombie and his colleagues resigning, and might an alliance with them become useful?
Doesn't matter who answers that.
I'm not going to answer that one.
David, or sorry, George, why don't we use this as a way to segue to you, and you can speak to this and then take us home. How's that sound?
Okay. Well, I'm not I know who David Crombie is. I read it, and I saw that a number of board members resigned as well. It certainly is a message. I think that the government's probably taking it seriously. I don't think they're brushing it off. No one should, particularly when these folks were appointed. So I think it's a wait and see part, because this is, David Crombie's point of view was that, that the green belt was being jeopardized by all this development and MZOs. So it's just a wait and see. I'm not qualified to, and I don't have enough information, but will it weigh in on what we're doing and how what we're trying to fight for? Hopefully, but I can't add any more than that, though. So with that, what I'd like to do is kind of finish
George?
this off. Yes.
I think one person had their hand up for Roger Jeans, maybe,
Okay, I didn't see it.
up in the top screen.
Okay, so do we have a question or?
Roger, you're a co-host now, so if you want to speak, turn your microphone.
That was just acknowledging the thank you.
We hit the wrong button and we wanted to thank you so much.
Well, that sounds to me like you hit the right button.
Great.
Back to you, George.
Okay, thank you. So let me go here and start talking about. I want to talk a little bit about the team. We are blessed by the quality of people that are on this board and tech committee. I'm not gonna ramble off names because I know sometimes they don't like attention, but let me put it this way. You've got retired politicians, an incredible lawyer, you have an incredible engineer, you have scientists on the tech committee, you have a CPA, there's a doctor, there's a crazy business guy like me that's on the board. So you've got a lot of people with a lot of business experience and skill sets that are fighting for you and pushing forward. So we're all very dedicated to this. But in the last 10 days, had we needed to go to the outside and get experts to help us, it probably would have cost us $50,000 to $60,000 to get all of this done. I can't tell you the rates that lawyers make. See, don't hurt me for this. I'm not even going to say a range. It's pretty high. So when you add in, 40 hours worth of work from a lawyer and an engineer at a lower rate, but still 40 hours a week there to put stuff like this together, plus an advisor from our lawyer who's a legal advisor to us. I mean, it's a great deal of money that we've saved the community. And over the last 2 years, we've played around with these numbers, and we've said we probably have saved the community anything from $250,000 to $300,000, not having to go to the outside. It's because of the skill sets that are at the table. But our focus has always been to have government intervene and stop this. We have worked very hard to get government leaders on side with us, and we've done that for the most part across from the very beginning. And it's been part of our mission. Now, our mission has been accomplished in terms of getting everyone on side and getting someone opposed, and as the Premier mentioned with Parm Gill back in July 29th, that they'll do whatever they can to stop it. And speaking of which, Megan, can you play that for me?
I'm not in favor of that. I believe in governing for the people, and when the people don't want something, you don't do it. Very, very simple. Parm's been in my office every second day, and I've had every minister of environment, minister of natural resources, Parm, and we're putting together a good plan moving forward. But I'll tell you, I'm just not in favor of it, and I'll pass it over to Parm. But again, folks, remember, you're the boss. You say jump, I say how high. That's how it works in my world. Same as the private sector business that we came from. It's always customer service excellence. You aren't going to put something in that the whole community is dead against. It's very simple. I know the mayor, you don't want it. No one wants it. I don't want it. We're going to make sure it doesn't happen one way or another. So we'll pass it over to Parm. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you for that question, Chris. As the Premier pointed out, Obviously I've been in his office regularly on this issue because I know how important it is to the community, and we have attended regularly the town hall meetings that are held locally, and I understand, and I've been also speaking to the ministers that are responsible, Minister Yakubaski and Minister Urick, and I feel fairly confident. And as the Premier just mentioned, I mean, the Premier and the government is all about serving the people and making sure that the decisions that we're making are in the best interest of people. If the community does not want a project to move forward, bottom line, we're going to make sure the project doesn't move forward. It's that simple. But we will have something to announce, hopefully, in the very near future officially. But for now, I do want to let the community know that we stand with you, we stand by you, and the ministers and my caucus colleagues, my cabinet colleagues, all are fully briefed and are aware of the situation in Campbellville and the Reed Road Quarry, and the Premier is fully briefed, and we're on the right path. So just stay tuned for news in the very near future. Thank you.
Okay. So it's fascinating, isn't it? We have the town that opposed it. We have the region and the regional councillors who opposed this. Our own councillors in town, the mayor who's attended every meeting has opposed this. We've heard our MPP come to a lot of our meetings, or one of his assistants send the same message even after the Premier's announcement, and the Premier himself. So we have all government offices, officials aligned. So I have a message to Premier Ford. Premier Ford, the residents of Milton, Campbellville, and Osagoya are waiting your final announcement. The announcement that stops the Campbellville quarry. The time has come. Unfortunately, we are in a process that is really unnecessary. Premier Ford, you said if the people don't want it, you will find a way to stop it. Well, sir, it's time to stop it. The people don't want it. Can we stop it now? The process is unnecessary. The people of this community don't want to be in a situation to raise after-tax dollars and defend something that shouldn't be here to begin with. Residents are counting on you, Premier, and MPP Parham Gill. But for now, we're going to follow through with this process just so that no one says we didn't do our part. Just so that no one says that this is no longer an issue for residents. It is an issue for residents, but residents are distracted by a virus. And right now, it feels like the application process is taking advantage of that. We know that a few months ago, Premier Ford, you received a letter from the OSSGA, which is the Ontario Sand and Gravel Association, to convince you to let this process decide. Well, Premier Ford, there is a reason for that. The industry knows that this process does not favor residents. Every step of the process, from figuring out timelines, how to respond, when to respond, where to respond, and how to plan to defend at an LPAT, this is not an equally fair process. Premier Ford, I believe you're someone who likes coming through on promises. We are waiting for that call, that email, or media release that says this is over. Residents don't want to be drawn into an LPAT or have to raise money. Premier, your promise in July, it was that arguably had made many believe that their concerns have been resolved. But the process we are in still goes on. Premier Ford, Parham Gill, we are awaiting your final decision, the fruition of your promises to stop this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment of truth. Your voices, your letters, your emails are more powerful than this quarry application or process in itself. Every government official we've engaged is now opposed to this. So what's the holdup? Let's just shut this down once and for all. This is the wrong place for a quarry, we all know it. The aggregate industry likes to refer to us as NIMBYists. We are not. We are human beings. We're Ontario residents, taxpayers, and voters. We have rights and the right to live free of risks that currently do not exist. I repeat, they do not exist. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us tonight. Let's get those letters delivered and let's shut this application down. Cease.
George, I have one last thing to say on a formal basis, and thank you for that. I would like to just, if people are reaching out to neighbors, friends, etc., and they are sending letters, if it's not through us, can you encourage people to reach out to us so that we know who has sent something, Just so again, when we're able to turn and say to Parham and to the Premier, JDCL's wrong. There's not only, in their latest letter, they said there's only 300 people still objecting. They played with the numbers so ridiculously. And we want to be able to say we're 1,000 plus, plus strong. And the higher that number is, and we need to know that number, the more important, it's so important. And it's part of our way to tell the Premier again that nobody wants this quarry. So again, if you could just have people reach out to us and let us know and share with us what they're saying if they don't do it through us. It's so incredibly important. So I'll be quiet. Thanks, George.
I wouldn't be, but thank you. So that's it. Unless there are further questions, Mike, I think we're wrapping it up. Let's shut
Yes,
this
George,
down.
we'll just keep the chat box open a little bit here so that people can make a last comment or they can say thank you to you on the way out. But that was a very strong statement, George. Thank you. And we're formally adjourned, but we're going to leave the chat box open for a couple minutes so people can say things like thank you, everyone in action.